Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing well out there. My name's Sandy. This is Sawing with Sandy. Today I'm not going to do any sawing though, but we can at the very least admire these trees out here. I feel very privileged to have access to these trees on my land. These trees, the red pine plantation, planted about 45 years ago before my time on the land here. And well, they've grown into some real nice harvestable trees. Now I'm at the point, as you're well aware, that I am actively thinning just so that the trees don't have stunted growth from well over competition. They're essentially squeezing themselves out. And so I'm over in that area right now and I'm harvesting trees, bringing them over to the sawmill and sawing them into lumber. However, I'm at the point where the summer is coming to an end, or it has ended, and now I'm going to be looking to the winter season. That's when I do primarily most of my sawing. And so I'm going to be boosting production here very shortly, but I am not overly happy with my general setup. It's been sort of a struggle over the last while figuring out what the perfect setup is. And I seem to think from time to time that I've got it all figured out. And well, then you see someone else's setup and you realize that your setup could be improved. I think my setup could be improved to make life a lot easier for me. And this is going to be especially true when I start increasing production, because if I let the small things sort of cascade, well, as soon as I start cutting more trees, they'll become a bigger and bigger pain in the behind. Now, let's have a look at where we're at here, just so we can take a step back in time and see where we came from. Way back in time, 4 or 5 years ago, and if you were here at that point watching me saw, I appreciate it and thank you for sticking around. But at that point, I had a structure right here. I built it out of logs. I didn't even debark them. I had a next to no slope on the roof, and well, thankfully the building didn't collapse on me under the weight of all that snow. Anyways, I called that Hillbilly Hideout 1.0. That setup, well, it got me off the ground, but that's just about all it did. It didn't do too much else. That was okay. However, it left a lot to be desired, hence why I built this building, the Hillbilly Hideout version 2.0. This thing's been in action for several years now. This is a well-built structure. However, it is not ideal, and so it is time to move on from it. The Hillbilly Hideout 2.0, 10 feet wide, and we're talking floor space, 10 feet wide, 20 feet long. In between the posts, we're at about 14 feet on the front. 12-12 slope on this thing. I went overboard, put 1 foot on center rafters, a little bit of an overhang. I think it sticks out 5 feet. And anyways, that's a good, well-built building. It's not serving its purpose anymore. One of the things I don't like about it anymore, which I used to praise, was the elevated floor. It keeps me out of the rain, keeps me out of the water, keeps me out of the snow, but it is a hassle to get up into, get out of. It's a hassle to get the sawmill in there. It's a hassle to move the sawmill around once it's in there. And while the time has come that I'm not putting the sawmill back in there. Now, where did we go from here? Well, I needed lumber space, and so I took lumber and started piling it in here after I got the sawmill out. Now, I did that probably about late spring this year, and this has provided me with a great spot to put lumber. It keeps it out of the dirt, it keeps it out of the rain. I can stack it up nicely, and well, I've got room to spare. Over here, you'll see this structure, this lean-to. I put this lean-to up as sort of an add-on to my original lumber shed. That little lumber shed back there, if you recall, used to sit back there. I used to walk from here, cross a little bridge over to the lumber shed to put my lumber. Well, fast forward, I got an updated sawmill. I got rid of the bridge and I moved the lumber shed. It now resides right here. Now this was fine and dandy because I could fill it with lumber very easily, especially when I built this lean-to to keep the sawmill under. However, with my lumber production going up, aside from this already being full, I'm going to very quickly get that other shed full, and so I need a bit more space. Now step back here, this lean-to. I essentially put the rafters leaning off the lumber shed, and then I put the new beam up supported by these posts. I built this log deck. The sawmill resides in here. However, this is not the perfect setup because the sawmill actually rolls logs to the opposite side of the log stops. And that's so that the sawdust doesn't shoot into the lumber shed. It shoots out here where I can scoop it out of the way. The whole idea here was that I could take lumber directly off the sawmill and put it in the lumber shed. Well, that works sometimes until, of course, you fill the lumber shed, and now you're left with lots of wood, lots of dust, and not very much space. So, what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is, instead of me sort of residing to the fact that I have to live with this, I'm going to do something about it. I know how to build. I have an awful lot of lumber floating around, and I got a sawmill to make that lumber. I also have you guys out there. You're like a knowledge base that I'm going to tap into for this next video series. What I'm going to do over the next while, and I'm not sure how long this will take, but the next while, I'm going to ask all of you for a little bit of help. Give me your best thoughts, your best drawings, your best ideas for a sawmill setup building. I'm going to build a new saw shed. Do we call it the Hillbilly Hideout 3.0? I don't know. You tell me. I want those sketches, those ideas. I want them down below. Send me an email. Let me know. I'm going to rely on all of you to build the next building that's going to replace this setup. Now, let's put the brakes on real quick here. I don't like to build things and then tear it down just for the good of my health. That building over there, I'm going to leave it alone. This right here, that is on the cutting block. That is on the table. I am willing to take down that lean-to and to move that shed, the lumber shed. I am not willing to move this shed. This one is too big. I can't lift it up. And my fear is if I try to tow it anywhere or push it, it'll fall off the blocks it's on and it'll never get back to a good state and it'll just deteriorate. That is going to stay where it is. This can go. The log deck can go. Obviously, this can move and all the debris. I want your best idea there in terms of workflow that will help me in sort of my next step of sawing. All right, with all that in mind, let's take a good look around where we're at. This area, the red pine forest, well, there's an awful lot of space here, but I'm not going to clear cut any trees. I'm going to be cutting enough trees as we're thinning. So what I want is ideas on how we can put up a new structure within this general area that's already open. Just to give you a bit of a scope here, we're at about 70 feet lengthwise. And then if you can imagine from the very front of this building here, the Hillbilly Hideout 2.0, to these trees over here, we're at 45 feet. Now that is not just the end of the dimensions, because this building is 10 feet wide. So if you can imagine this not being there, you can go back another 10 feet, and then you could probably go back another 5 to 10 feet at that point. So overall, from the end of that building, even behind that building, out to behind me, you're probably more or less 60 feet. 60 feet, 70 feet. I want to keep this building. That stuff there can go. Now let's just duck around the side here, just so you can see what we're dealing with. And so all this stuff can go. I'll reuse it, of course, but it can go. And if we look out here, you see where the other lumber shed, the other sawmill shed ends. You could essentially use all this space. And if you needed to, you could, whatever you need to do back here, you could use some of this space. Now, I might end up putting this lumber shed back where it was. I might end up moving it. Maybe I'll move it down there. Maybe I'll put it over there. Maybe I'll put it against the trees. I'll put it down there. This building, the lean-to, I'm probably just going to take the roofing steel off to reuse it. And I'll take the rafters off and reuse them. And then this will obviously not be here. In terms of the log loading deck, this can go as well. Once again, I'll reuse it, but it can go. And that'll leave us a big open area here. From the front of that saw shed to the trees, 45 feet. From there back, you know, you're probably 15 feet of usable space. And if we go from pretty much where the chipper is, maybe even that tree there in front of it, all the way to where the trees start here, you're at about 70 feet. I'm looking for a structure that's going to completely cover my sawmill here. And the only other stipulation I'd like is I want to have a log deck again. And I want the logs to load from the right, from this side, onto the sawmill. I'll be standing back here sawing. I want to be able to unload the lumber off this end. I also want to be able to have room where I can stack the offcuts or the slab wood in addition to the lumber. Now eventually the lumber will be put into that saw shed, but just in the interim when it's being cut, I'd like somewhere back here to pile it. Aside from that, that's all I've got for you. I'm looking for your best ideas. Once again, this will be heavily dependent on the ideas you have. I have some ideas, but you know, I only know as much as I can think of. So if you've got ideas for me, I would appreciate it. I want to try something a little bit different, give myself a little bit more space. And so that's why this build series is coming about. I'm not new to sawing. I know what I like. I know what I need. I just don't feel like I have it. I hope you can all help me with that, and we can take part in this next series together. You can help me as I go. And hopefully when we're all done, we'll be left with something unique and something to be proud of. I guess Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was my setup. That's all right. As always, if you could do me that big favor, please make sure you're liking this video, subscribing. And if you haven't done so already, check out sawingwithsandy.com. I've got all kinds of stuff going on there. I'd be happy for you to join me. And if you're on any of the other social platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, be sure to look me up in the video description here. See you next time.